In the vastness of space, among the glittering stars and swirling nebulas, humanity had finally earned its place in the Galactic Armada. It was a coalition of advanced alien species that ruled over interstellar space with technology far beyond human imagination. But while other races brought sleek warships bristling with weapons and shields strong enough to withstand supernovas, humanity's contribution was less impressive. The ship they called the Vanguard was a joke, relic cobbled together from outdated parts and scavenged scraps. Its hull was patched with mismatched metal plates. Its engines groaned under the strain of even basic maneuvers. And its weapons were so old they might as well have been museum pieces. To make matters worse, the crew wasn't exactly elite either. They were misfits, outcasts, and rejects who'd somehow ended up on this forgotten hunk of junk. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring at the holographic display showing their position within the Armada. Their pitiful little ship floated near the back of the formation, surrounded by giants. Sleek alien vessels zipped past them, glowing with energy fields and armed to the teeth. Compared to those marvels of engineering, the Vanguard looked like a child's toy left behind after playtime. Elias sighed and rubbed his temples. He knew what everyone thought about his ship and about him. Once, he'd been a decorated officer in Earth's military, leading fleets into battle against insurmountable odds. But that was before everything went wrong. Before the failure that cost lives. Before he became the man no one wanted to trust anymore. "Sir," came a hesitant voice from behind him. It was Lieutenant Mara Chun, the ship's communications officer. She was young, eager, and still learning how to navigate life aboard such a chaotic vessel. "We're receiving another message from command." Elias turned to face her. "Let me guess, they want us to stay out of the way?" Mara hesitated, then nodded. "Pretty much. They've assigned us to the rear guard again. If anything happens, we're supposed to retreat immediately." A bitter laugh escaped Elias's lips. Retreat, as if anyone expected the Vanguard to hold its ground long enough to need retreating. Still, orders were orders. "Understood. Relay the message to the crew." As Mara returned to her station, Elias glanced around the bridge. His crew worked diligently despite the mockery they endured. There was Chief Engineer Dax Patel, whose dark skin glistened with sweat as he tinkered endlessly with the ship's failing systems. Beside him, Pilot Rhea Novak leaned back in her chair, chewing gum and spinning her seat lazily. And then there was Dr. Elric Thorne, the ship's eccentric scientist, muttering to himself as he scribbled notes on a tablet. Despite their quirks, or maybe because of them, Elias couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. These people weren't perfect, but they were survivors. They'd been thrown together on this rickety ship and told to fend for themselves, yet here they were, ready to do whatever it took to prove humanity belonged in the stars. But proving themselves wouldn't be easy. Not when the galaxy saw them as weaklings. Not when their own allies dismissed them as irrelevant. Hours later, the Armada received word of an incoming threat. A massive alien invasion force was approaching, intent on conquering key territories across the sector. Every ship prepared for battle, weapons charging and shields activating. On the Vanguard, however, things were quieter. The crew moved efficiently, ensuring their limited resources were ready for action. When the time came for the pre-battle briefing, Elias found himself seated at the very back of the virtual conference room. Holograms of alien commanders filled the space, their towering forms dwarfing his own. One by one, they outlined strategies, boasting about their ship's capabilities and discussing tactics. When it was Elias's turn to speak, silence fell not out of respect, but out of disdain. "Well?" asked Commander Ziller, a reptilian alien with scales that shimmered like emeralds. His tone dripped with condescension. "What is your primitive vessel plan to contribute?" Elias clenched his fists beneath the table, but kept his expression neutral. "We'll follow orders and support the fleet as needed," he replied calmly. Zealer sneered. "Support? With what? Your rust bucket won't last 5 minutes in combat." The comment drew chuckles from several other commanders. Elias ignored them, focusing instead on the faint hum of activity coming through his earpiece. Back on the Vanguard, his crew was hard at work finalizing preparations. Unbeknownst to the rest of the Armada, humanity hadn't come entirely unprepared. For months, scientists back on Earth had been secretly developing experimental upgrades for the Vanguard. Quantum cloaking devices, plasma cannons powered by fusion reactors, nanite swarms capable of devouring enemy ships. These were just a few of the innovations now hidden within the ship's battered frame. Of course, none of these upgrades had been tested in real combat. There was a good chance they'd malfunction or blow up entirely. But sometimes, desperation bred brilliance. As the meeting concluded, Elias signed off and returned to the bridge. His crew greeted him with nervous smiles, sensing the weight of what lay ahead. "All right, team," he said, addressing them all. "It's time to show these aliens what humans are made of." Dax raised a hand. "Just to clarify, sir, are we talking show them in a good way or a catastrophic explosion kind of way?" Elias smirked. "Both, probably. Let's get to work." And so, as the Armada mobilized for war, the Vanguard drifted silently toward the edge of the battlefield. To the rest of the fleet, it was nothing more than a relic waiting to be destroyed. But inside its worn hull, something extraordinary was brewing. Something that would change the fate of the battle and perhaps the galaxy itself. For now, though, the Vanguard remained a shadow, unnoticed and underestimated. And that was exactly how Elias wanted it. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the alien invasion force descended upon the Galactic Armada. Thousands of biomechanical ships, each one a grotesque fusion of flesh and metal, surged forward like a swarm of locusts. Their engines roared with an eerie, organic hum, and their hulls pulsed with veins of glowing energy. These were not machines built for war. They were living weapons, designed to consume and destroy everything in their path. At the forefront of the Armada, sleek alien vessels engaged the enemy with beams of searing light and missiles that tore through space. Explosions lit up the void as ships on both sides were ripped apart. The aliens' numbers were overwhelming, their ferocity unmatched. One by one, the Armada's finest began to fall, their shields collapsing under relentless barrages. Panic spread through the ranks as even the most advanced ships struggled to hold their ground. Far from the main conflict, the Vanguard hovered silently near the edge of the battlefield. Its crew watched the carnage unfold on their monitors, hearts pounding as they witnessed the sheer scale of the devastation. Captain Elias Voss stood at the center of the bridge, his jaw clenched tightly. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it, the test they'd been preparing for. "All right," Elias said, breaking the tense silence. "Let's see if all those late nights tinkering paid off." Chief Engineer Dax Patel wiped grease-streaked hands on his jumpsuit and nodded. "Quantum Shroud Generator is online, sir. Activating now." With a flick of a switch, the ship's experimental cloaking device hummed to life. A shimmering field enveloped the Vanguard, bending light and radar around its hull until it vanished completely from sight. To anyone watching, the battered human ship had simply disappeared. "Well?" Elias asked, glancing at Lieutenant Mara Chun. "Are we invisible?" Mara checked her instruments, her fingers flying across the console. "Looks like it, sir. No heat signatures, no radar, pings nothing. If I didn't know better, I'd say we weren't here." Elias allowed himself a small smile. "Good, let's stay that way." While the rest of the Armada fought desperately against the alien horde, the Vanguard slipped behind enemy lines unnoticed. Its engines ran at minimal power to avoid detection, and its crew moved with quiet efficiency. For once, their ship's sluggish speed worked in their favor. It made them harder to spot among the chaos dot as they navigated the battlefield. The crew monitored communications from the other ships. Alien commanders barked orders in guttural languages, while panicked voices from the Armada begged for reinforcements. It was clear that the tide of the battle was turning against them. The invaders were too many, too fast, and too ruthless. But the Vanguard wasn't there to fight, not yet. They had a different mission: reconnaissance. Dr. Elric Thorne, the eccentric scientist, leaned over his tablet, analyzing data streaming in from the ship's sensors. "Fascinating," he muttered, his eyes wide behind thick glasses. "These creatures aren't just piloting their ships, they are their ships. Look at this biological structure. It's almost parasitic. What does that mean for us?" Pilot Rhea Novak asked, spinning her chair around to face him. "It means," Elric replied, tapping furiously on his screen, "that these ships are alive. And if they're alive, they can be killed, or at least disabled, with the right tools." Elias turned to Dax. "How close are we to testing the plasma cannon?" Dax hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "Close enough, I guess. But remember, this thing hasn't been tested outside simulations. If we fire it and something goes wrong, we could blow ourselves up." "That's a risk we'll have to take," Elias said firmly. "Right now, we're the only ones who can get close enough to hit them where it hurts. Prep the weapon." The crew sprang into action, double-checking every system and recalibrating the plasma cannon. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was also a sense of determination. These humans might have been underestimated by everyone else, but they weren't about to let that stop them. As the Vanguard drifted closer to the heart of the enemy fleet, the crew spotted their first target, a massive biomechanical cruiser bristling with tentacle-like appendages. The ship loomed menacingly, its surface writhing with pulsating veins of energy. It was clearly a key player in the invasion force. "Target locked," Mara announced, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Plasma cannon is charged and ready." Elias took a deep breath. Fire. With a deafening roar, the plasma cannon unleashed a blinding beam of superheated energy. The shot streaked across space, striking the alien cruiser with pinpoint accuracy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a violent shudder, the ship began to break apart. Its living tissue sizzled and blackened, while its metallic components melted into slag. Within seconds, the once mighty vessel exploded in a shower of debris. The crew of the Vanguard erupted into cheers, slapping each other on the back and shouting in triumph. But their celebration was short-lived. Almost immediately, alarms blared as nearby alien ships detected the source of the attack. "They know we're here," Mara shouted, frantically scanning the radar. "Multiple hostiles closing in. Activate evasive maneuvers." Elias barked. "Get us out of range." Rhea gripped the controls, her knuckles white as she pushed the engines to their limit. The Vanguard darted through the chaos, narrowly avoiding streams of enemy fire. The cloaking device flickered under the strain, threatening to give away their position. "We can't keep this up forever," Dax warned, his voice strained. "The generator's overheating." "Then we'll have to finish what we started," Elias replied grimly. "Elric, how's the nanite swarm coming along?" Elric adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling slightly. "Ready to deploy, but there's no guarantee it'll work. These things are unpredictable." "Unpredictable is better than dead," Elias said. "Release them." Elric tapped a final command into his tablet, and a swarm of microscopic nanites poured out of the Vanguard's launch tubes. Invisible to the naked eye, the tiny machines spread rapidly, infiltrating the nearest alien ships. Once inside, they began dismantling the biomechanical structures from within, consuming and replicating as they went. Within moments, the effects became apparent. Dozens of enemy vessels faltered, their movements growing sluggish and erratic. Hulls cracked open, spilling clouds of vaporized tissue into space. Entire squadrons disintegrated before the astonished eyes of the Armada. The aliens, confused and terrified, scrambled to respond. Reports flooded in from their commanders, accusing each other of sabotage or equipment failure. None of them suspected that a single, invisible human ship was responsible for the destruction. Back on the Vanguard, the crew worked tirelessly to keep their systems running. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and warning lights flashed across every panel. Despite the chaos, there was a fierce pride in their eyes. They weren't just surviving, they were winning. Elias watched the carnage unfold on the monitor, his expression unreadable. "Not bad for a bunch of misfits," he murmured to himself. Mara glanced at him, a grin spreading across her face. "Sir, permission to say something cheesy?" "Go ahead," Elias said, raising an eyebrow. "This is what happens when you underestimate humanity." The words hung in the air, echoing the unspoken truth that had driven them all this far. Humanity might not have had the best ships, the strongest weapons, or the most advanced technology, but they had something no one else did: ingenuity, adaptability, and a refusal to give up, even when the odds seemed impossible. For now, the Vanguard remained hidden, its presence known only by the trail of destruction it left in its wake. But the battle was far from over. The alien fleet still outnumbered the Armada, and their command ship, a colossal dreadnought looming at the center of the formation, had yet to engage directly. Elias knew they couldn't afford to rest. Not yet. There was still work to be done, sacrifices to make, and victories to claim. But for the first time since joining the Galactic Armada, he felt a spark of hope dawn, because somewhere out there, amidst the stars and the wreckage, humanity had proven itself. And if the galaxy thought the Vanguard was weak, it was about to learn just how wrong it was. Asterisk. The alien fleet was in disarray. Ships that had once moved with terrifying precision now stumbled through space, their biomechanical forms crumbling under the relentless assault of the Vanguard's gnatid swarm. The tiny machines swarmed like locusts, devouring metal and flesh alike, leaving behind only drifting clouds of ash and debris. For every alien vessel consumed, another faltered, its systems collapsing as the microscopic invaders spread uncontrollably. But despite the chaos they had unleashed, the crew of the Vanguard knew their victory was far from complete. The enemy command ship, a monstrous dreadnought, nearly twice the size of the largest Armada vessels, still loomed at the center of the battlefield. Its surface bristled with weapons, and its engines glowed with an ominous red light, casting a sinister shadow over the surrounding ships. It hadn't fired a single shot yet, but everyone aboard the Vanguard understood what it meant. This was the true threat. The heart of the invasion force. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the massive ship displayed on the main monitor. "That thing," he said quietly, pointing at the screen, "is why we're still here." His words hung heavy in the air. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, knowing full well what he implied. Taking down the command ship would require more than clever tricks or experimental upgrades. It would demand everything they had. And possibly more. Chief Engineer Dax Patel wiped sweat from his brow as he studied the readouts flooding his console. "Sir, our systems are already stretched to the limit. If we push them any harder, we risk blowing ourselves up." "We don't have a choice," Elias replied firmly. "If we don't take out that dreadnought, all our efforts so far will be for nothing. The rest of the Armada can't hold out much longer." Lieutenant Mara Chun nodded grimly, her fingers dancing across her communications panel. "He's right. I'm picking up distress signals from multiple ships. They're overwhelmed." Dr. Elric Thorne adjusted his glasses, his voice tinged with nervous excitement. There is one option left, though it's highly unstable. He tapped a few commands into his tablet, bringing up schematics of the ship's reactor core. We could overload the fusion reactor to create a massive EMP blast. It would disable every enemy ship within range, but it might also destroy us in the process. A tense silence fell over the bridge. Everyone knew what such a plan entailed. Sacrificing the Vanguard and themselves was not something anyone relished, especially when they'd come so far against impossible odds. Elias broke the silence first. How wide a radius would the EMP cover? Elric hesitated, then answered, "At maximum output? Enough to knock out the entire alien fleet, including the Dreadnought. But like I said, there's no guarantee we'll survive." Pilot Rhea Novak leaned back in her chair, chewing on her gum thoughtfully. "So basically, we either fry ourselves along with them or let them win. Nice options." Elias ignored her sarcasm, his mind racing. There had to be another way, a way to ensure their survival while still dealing a decisive blow to the enemy. Then an idea struck him. What if we didn't detonate the EMP here? He asked, turning to face the crew. What if we delivered it directly to the Dreadnought? Dax frowned. "You mean ramming it?" "Not exactly," Elias clarified. "We use the cloaking device to sneak close enough to board the Dreadnought. Once inside, we plant the EMP charge deep in its core and trigger it manually. That way, we can escape before it goes off." The room erupted into murmurs as the crew processed the plan. It was risky suicidally so, but it offered a slim chance of success where none existed before. "It's insane," Dax muttered, shaking his head. "But it might actually work." "Insane is kind of our specialty," Rhea quipped, grinning despite the gravity of the situation. "All right," Elias said, raising his voice to cut through the chatter. "Here's how it's going to go down. Dax, prep the EMP charge and make sure it's stable enough to transport. Mara, keep monitoring their communications. Find us a weak spot in their defenses. Rhea, get us as close to that Dreadnought as possible without being detected. And Elric." He paused, locking eyes with the scientist. "You're coming with me." Elric blinked, startled. "With you? Into the Dreadnought?" "You built this thing," Elias said, gesturing toward the EMP schematics on the tablet. "If anything goes wrong, you're the only one who can fix it." Elric swallowed hard, but nodded. "Understood, sir." With the plan set, the crew sprang into action. Dax and his team worked feverishly to modify the EMP charge, reinforcing its casing to withstand the stresses of transport. Meanwhile, Mara intercepted alien transmissions, identifying gaps in their patrols caused by the ongoing confusion wrought by the nanite swarm. Rhea guided the Vanguard closer to the Dreadnought, weaving between debris fields and dodging stray shots with practiced skill. Finally, after what felt like hours, they were in position. The cloaking device masked their approach as they slipped into the shadow of the massive ship. Through the viewport, the Dreadnought loomed above them, its jagged hull pulsating with veins of energy. It looked less like a machine and more like some ancient, predatory beast waiting to strike. "Ready the boarding pod," Elias ordered, strapping on a utility belt loaded with tools and explosives. Elric followed suit, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the strap of his oxygen tank dot as the pod detached from the Vanguard and drifted silently toward the Dreadnought. Elias glanced at Elric. "You good?" Elric forced a shaky smile. "Define good," Elias chuckled darkly. "Fair enough. Just stick close to me, and we'll make it through this." The pod latched onto the Dreadnought's hull with a soft thud. Using plasma cutters, Elias and Elric burned through the thick organic material until they breached the interior. The air inside was humid and reeked of sulfur, making it hard to breathe even with their masks. Strange fleshy walls pulsed rhythmically, as if the ship itself were alive. "This way," Elias whispered, consulting a handheld scanner. The device led them deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, guiding them toward the dreadnought's core. Along the way, they encountered clusters of alien drones, small, insect-like creatures that scuttled toward them with razor-sharp mandibles. Elias dispatched them quickly with bursts from his plasma pistol, leaving smoldering husks in their wake. Despite the danger, the two men pressed onward, driven by adrenaline and sheer determination. Every step brought them closer to their goal and closer to potential disaster. When they finally reached the core chamber, they found themselves standing before a writhing mass of pulsating tissue and glowing conduits. At the center of it all was a massive crystalline structure, humming with raw energy. This was the heart of the dreadnought, the source of its power. "Set the charge," Elias instructed, keeping watch as Elric planted the EMP device at the base of the crystal. His hands moved swiftly but carefully, attaching wires and adjusting settings with practiced precision. "How long do we have?" Elias asked, glancing nervously at the timer on the charge. 5 minutes, Elric replied, his voice tight with tension. "Plenty of time to get out, if nothing goes wrong." As if on cue, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. Alarms blared throughout the chamber, accompanied by the sound of approaching footsteps, or rather, claws scraping against metal. "They know we're here," Elias growled, raising his weapon. "Let's move." The pair sprinted back the way they came, retracing their steps through the twisting corridors. Behind them, the aliens gave chase, their screeches echoing through the narrow passages. Plasma bolts zipped past their heads, narrowly missing as they ducked and weaved through the chaos. When they finally reached the boarding pod, both men were drenched in sweat and breathing heavily. Elias slammed the hatch shut just as the first wave of pursuers arrived, pounding furiously on the hull. "Go!" he shouted to Rhea over the comlink. The pod jettisoned from the dreadnought with a burst of acceleration, leaving the pursuing aliens behind. As they sped away, Elias watched the countdown on the MP timer tick steadily downward. 3, 2, 1. A blinding flash of light engulfed the dreadnought, followed by a deafening boom that rippled through space. The massive ship shuddered violently, its glowing vanes dimming and fading as its systems collapsed. Within moments, the once mighty vessel crumbled into pieces, drifting lifelessly among the stars. Back on the Vanguard, the crew erupted into cheers, slapping each other on the back and shouting in triumph. But Elias remained silent, staring at the wreckage on the monitor. They had done it. They had taken down the most powerful ship in the alien fleet. Against all odds, humanity had proven itself. Yet Elias couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. The battle may have been won, but the war was still raging. And somewhere out there, new threats awaited. For now, though, the Vanguard floated quietly in the void, battered but unbroken. Its crew celebrated their unlikely victory, knowing full well that they had earned their place among the stars, not through brute strength or advanced technology, but through sheer ingenuity and unyielding determination, because that was what made humanity special. That was what made them dangerous. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them head-on, proving time and again that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The Emplast had done its job. The alien dreadnought, once the backbone of the invasion force, was now a lifeless hulk drifting in space. Its glowing vanes were dark, its engines silent, and its weapons reduced to useless scrap. The shockwave from the explosion rippled outward, disabling countless enemy ships caught in its radius. Dozens of biomechanical vessels faltered, their systems fried, and their living tissue shriveling into nothingness. On the Vanguard, the crew watched in stunned silence as the battlefield shifted dramatically. Alien ships that had been advancing relentlessly suddenly froze in place, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Some drifted aimlessly, while others simply exploded as their fragile biological components succumbed to the sudden power loss. It was a massacre, but one orchestrated by humans. Not brute force or overwhelming numbers. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the railing as he stared at the carnage unfolding before him. His heart raced, not just from the adrenaline of what they'd accomplished, but from the realization of how close they'd come to failure. The plan had been reckless, dangerous, and borderline suicidal. Yet, it had worked. Against all odds, the Vanguard, the feeblest ship in the Armada, had turned the tide of the battle. "Sir," Lieutenant Mar Chun's voice broke through his thoughts. "We're receiving reports from the rest of the Armada. They're cheering." Ilias turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Cheering?" She nodded, a hint of disbelief in her tone. "They're calling us heroes. Everyone's talking about what we just did." Chief Engineer Dax Patel let out a low whistle from his station. "Guess we're not the laughingstock anymore." Ria Novak leaned back in her chair, grinning ear to ear. About time someone gave those aliens a taste of humanity. Despite the light-hearted banter, the mood on the bridge was bittersweet. The victory had come at a cost. Systems across the Vanguard were failing, strained far beyond their limits by the EMP overload. Warning lights blinked incessantly, and sparks flew from overloaded consoles. The cloaking device, which had kept them hidden for so long, was completely fried. Even the engines groaned under the strain, threatening to give out entirely. "We can't stay here," Dax said, his voice tense. "If any of those surviving ships figure out what happened, they'll come after us." "He's right," Elias agreed. "We need to move. Ria, get us out of here." Ria gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white as she coaxed the battered ship into motion. The Vanguard limped away from the wreckage, leaving behind the remnants of the alien fleet. But even as they retreated, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't truly safe yet. Somewhere out there, the remaining alien forces were regrouping, and they wouldn't forget what had happened. Hours later, the Vanguard found temporary refuge in the shadow of a nearby asteroid field. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage, patching leaks, rerouting power, and stabilizing critical systems. Exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone, but no one complained. They knew how lucky they were to still be alive. As Dax welded a cracked conduit in the engine room, Dr. Elric Thorne sat hunched over his tablet, reviewing data collected during their infiltration of the dreadnought. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the information, his fingers trembling slightly. "Elric?" Elias asked, noticing the scientist's expression. "What is it?" Elric looked up, his face pale. I think I know why the aliens attacked." Elias frowned, stepping closer. "Why?" "They weren't invading for territory or resources," Elric explained, his voice shaky. "They were harvesting. Those biomechanical ships, they're built using organic material, living tissue. And based on this data," he hesitated, swallowing hard, "they've been targeting inhabited planets to feed their growth." A chill ran down Elias's spine. "You mean?" "Yes," Elric confirmed grimly. "They consume entire populations. Billions of lives, reduced to fuel for their war machine." The revelation hit the crew like a punch to the gut. What they had faced wasn't just an enemy, it was a nightmare. A species driven by hunger and greed, capable of unimaginable destruction. For a moment, the weight of it all threatened to crush them. But then Elias straightened, his jaw tightening with resolve. "That changes nothing," he said firmly. "If anything, it makes our fight even more important. We stop them, no matter the cost." His words galvanized the crew. Tired as they were, they redoubled their efforts, determined to keep the Vanguard operational. Every bolt tightened, every wire spliced, brought them one step closer to being ready for whatever came next. Meanwhile, aboard the surviving alien ships, chaos reigned. The loss of the dreadnought had shattered their chain of command, leaving the invaders disorganized and leaderless. Factions argued over who should take charge, while others called for retreat. Fear spread among their ranks, not just of the Armada, but of the mysterious force that had crippled their fleet. One alien commander, however, refused to back down. General Crither, a towering insectoid creature with chitinous armor and glowing green eyes, stood at the center of his flagship's bridge. Around him, his subordinates whispered nervously, recounting tales of the invisible ship that had destroyed their greatest weapon. Enough! Crither barked, slamming a clawed fist onto the console. This phantom vessel will not deter us. It is weak, flawed, a mere shadow compared to our might. But sir, one officer stammered, its attacks are unlike anything we've encountered. Their technology, it adapts, evolves. Crither sneered. Technology means nothing without strength. Find me that ship. Hunt it down. And when you do, he paused, his voice dripping with venom. Burn it to ash. Back on the Vanguard, the crew prepared for the next phase of the battle. With the Armada regaining control of the battlefield, the human ship slipped back into formation, earning nods of respect from alien commanders who had once mocked them. Commander Ziller, the reptilian officer who had dismissed the Vanguard as irrelevant, approached Elias via holographic communication. You have proven yourself worthy. Captain Voss, Ziller admitted, his tone grudging but sincere. Your ingenuity has saved us all. Elias nodded curtly. We're not done yet. There are still enemies out there, and they won't stop until we do. Ziller's scales shimmered as he inclined his head. Then we will stand together. For now, return to your ship, rest, rebuild. When the time comes, we will call upon you again. As the transmission ended, Elias turned to his crew. Looks like we've earned ourselves a brief reprieve. Use it wisely. The crew exchanged weary smiles, knowing full well that their work was far from over. But for the first time, they felt a sense of pride, not just in themselves, but in humanity as a whole. They had proven that even the smallest, weakest ship could make a difference. That innovation and determination could overcome raw power dot, and as the Vanguard floated quietly among the stars, battered but unbowed, Elias allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Humanity had always been underestimated, dismissed as fragile and insignificant. But today, they had shown the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, they could rest easy, knowing they had fought and won with everything they had, because that was what made humanity special. That was what made them dangerous. And no matter what lay ahead, they would continue to fight, proving time and again that humanity belonged among the stars. The galaxy was quiet for now. The alien invasion force had retreated, its numbers decimated and its leadership fractured. Ships that once dominated the battlefield now drifted aimlessly in space, their biomechanical forms lifeless husks. The Galactic Armada regrouped, tending to damaged vessels and mourning the losses suffered during the brutal conflict. But amidst the somber atmosphere, a new sense of hope began to emerge. Hope fueled by one ship, one crew, and one species that refused to back down. The Vanguard floated silently near the edge of the debris field, its hull scorched and battered but still intact. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly to repair what they could, knowing full well that their respite might be fleeting. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars through the cracked viewport. His mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The aliens weren't gone. They were retreating, regrouping, and plotting their next move. And when they returned, humanity would need to be ready. Sir, Lieutenant Mara Chun called from her station, snapping Elias out of his reverie. We're receiving a message from command. Elias turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Put it on screen." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Commander Ziller's towering reptilian form. His emerald scales shimmered faintly as he inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Captain Voss," he began, his voice steady but tinged with respect. "Your actions have earned you and your species a place among the greatest warriors of the Armada. You have proven yourselves worthy allies." Elias nodded curtly. "Thank you, Commander. But this isn't over yet. The aliens will return, stronger and more determined than before." Ziller's eyes narrowed slightly, betraying a hint of concern. "Indeed, intelligence suggests they are rallying near the outer rim of the sector. Their leader, General Cruther, is known for his ruthlessness. He will not rest until he has avenged his defeat. And we won't let him," Elias replied firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll stop them." Ziller studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Very well. When the time comes, the Armada will stand with you. For now, prepare yourselves. We may need your unique ingenuity again soon." As the transmission ended, Elias turned to his crew. Each member looked weary but resolute, their faces marked by exhaustion yet lit with determination. They had been pushed to their limits, tested in ways no one could have anticipated, and somehow they had prevailed. "Well?" Rhea Novak asked, spinning her chair around to face him. "What's the plan, boss? Are we sticking around or heading home?" Elias crossed his arms, his gaze sweeping across the bridge. "Home isn't an option, not while those monsters are still out there. We've got work to do." Chief Engineer Dax Patel sighed, rubbing grease-streaked hands against his jumpsuit. "Figures. Just when I thought I'd finally get some sleep." Dr. Elric Thorne adjusted his glasses, peering nervously at the captain. "You don't mean another upgrade, do you?" Elias smirked. "Exactly that. If we're going to face Cruther and his fleet, we'll need every trick we can muster. Dax, start working on reinforcing the engines. We'll need speed if we're going to outmaneuver them. Elric, see if you can adapt a nanite swarm to target specific types of organic material. I want something even deadlier this time." The crew groaned collectively, but there was no real resistance. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting countless lives across the galaxy. Lives that depended on humanity to step up and fight. Days passed as the Vanguard underwent another round of frantic modifications. The crew worked around the clock, cobbling together parts scavenged from destroyed alien ships and integrating them into their own systems. Sparks flew in the engine room as Dax welded new components into place, while Elric tinkered endlessly with vials of nanites, muttering to himself as he fine-tuned their programming. Meanwhile, Elias spent hours poring over tactical maps, analyzing potential strategies for the upcoming battle. He knew that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to defeat Cruther. They needed precision, timing, and above all, creativity. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to turn weaknesses into advantages. That mindset would carry them through whatever came next. Finally, the day arrived. Reports poured in from the Armada's scouts. The alien fleet was massing near the edge of the sector, preparing for a final assault. Thousands of ships, each larger and more menacing than the last, converged under Cruther's command. The general himself led the charge aboard his flagship, a monstrous vessel, bristling with weapons and glowing with malevolent energy. "They're coming," Mara announced, her voice tight with tension. Estimated arrival in 10 minutes. Elias clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "All right, team. This is it. Everything we've done has led us to this moment. Let's show them why they should fear humanity." Rhea gripped the controls, her knuckles wide as she brought the Vanguard to life. The ship shuddered slightly, its engines roaring despite the strain. Dax monitored the reactor core, ensuring it remained stable under the increased power demands. Elric activated the upgraded nanite swarm, watching anxiously as the tiny machines swirled within their containment tubes, ready to unleash havoc. As the alien fleet approached, the Galactic Armada formed a defensive line, shields raised and weapons primed. But at the center of the formation, the Vanguard stood apart, its experimental upgrades humming with barely contained energy. To the other ships, it still looked like a relic, a patchwork of mismatched parts held together by sheer willpower. But to those who knew better, it was a weapon unlike any other. The battle began with a deafening roar as both sides opened fire. Beams of light streaked across space, missiles exploded in brilliant bursts, and ships on both sides crumbled under the relentless barrage. Amidst the chaos, the Vanguard darted forward, weaving between enemy vessels with astonishing agility. Its cloaking device, hastily repaired, masked its presence long enough for it to strike without warning. When the first plasma cannon fired, the effect was devastating. A massive alien cruiser shattered under the impact, its living tissue boiling away as molten metal sprayed into space. Before the invaders could react, the nanite swarm surged outward, infecting nearby ships and turning them into floating graveyards. Panic spread through the alien ranks as their seemingly invincible fleet faltered, but Crither was not so easily deterred. His flagship loomed large, unleashing a storm of firepower that forced the Vanguard to retreat momentarily. Warning alarms blared as the human ship took hit after hit, its shields flickering dangerously close to failure. "We can't keep this up," Dax shouted, frantically rerouting power to stabilize the failing systems. "Yes, we can," Elias snapped, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Mara, plot a course straight for Crither's ship. We end this now." Mara hesitated, her eyes wide. "Are you sure about this, sir?" "It's suicide." "It's our only shot," Elias replied grimly. "Do it." With a deep breath, Mara pushed the engines to their absolute limit. The Vanguard surged forward, dodging streams of enemy fire as it closed the distance to Crither's flagship. The alien commander barked orders furiously, directing his forces to intercept the charging human ship. But it was too late. As the Vanguard collided with the flagship's hull, its remaining nanites and plasma reserves detonated in a cataclysmic explosion. The alien vessel erupted in flames, its core collapsing inward as shockwaves rippled through space. Nearby ships were caught in the blast, torn apart by the sheer force of the detonation. On board the Vanguard, the crew braced themselves as the ship lurched violently. Alarms screamed, consoles sparked, and the lights dimmed to near darkness. For a moment, it seemed as though the battered vessel might finally succumb to the damage. But then, miraculously, the engines roared back to life, sputtering weakly but holding steady. Did we do it?" Rhea whispered, her voice trembling. Elias stared at the monitor, where the remnants of Crither's fleet scattered in disarray. The general's flagship was gone, reduced to drifting debris. Without their leader, the invaders broke rank, fleeing into the void. "We did it," Elias said quietly, a note of awe in his voice. "Against all odds, we did it." The bridge erupted into cheers, the crew hugging each other and shouting in triumph. Tears streamed down Mara's face as she slumped back in her chair, overwhelmed by relief. Even Dax allowed himself a rare smile, patting the console affectionately as if thanking the ship itself for surviving. As the Armada celebrated their victory, messages flooded in from alien commanders who had once mocked humanity. Now, their voices carried nothing but admiration and perhaps a trace of fear. Humanity had proven itself not just as survivors, but as innovators and warriors capable of standing toe-to-toe with the greatest powers in the galaxy. Back on the Vanguard, Elias addressed his crew one final time. "Today, we showed the galaxy what humans are made of. And if anyone ever forgets..." He paused, allowing a small grin to spread across his face. We'll remind them. The battered ship limped away from the battlefield, its journey far from over. But as it floated silently among the stars, battered but unbowed, one thing was certain: humanity had earned its place among the stars. And the Vanguard, once the laughing stock of the Armada, had become a legend, because sometimes the feeblest ship can become the fiercest nightmare. All it takes is a little ingenuity, determination, and a refusal to give up.